Ask the Podcast Coach for November 30th, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. That means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcast. Wow, zoomed in big on Dave here. From the School of Podcasting.com. And joining me right over there is the one and only
back
Jim.
Way up.
That's it. From HomeGadgetGeeks.com. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Happy post-Thanksgiving Saturday, whatever this is. Friday's got a name. Monday has a name.
Isn't
but
this
Saturday and Sunday? I don't.
I thought Saturday was like buy local Saturday or something that just never caught on.
I think that's Tuesday.
Okay, yeah, because there's
maybe the chat room can let us know. But there is a buy local. There is a buy local day.
Yeah,
Cyber Monday, right? Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I think Tuesday is buy local. But anyways, it's Ask the Podcast Coach Saturday. So you're here. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
And I'm I don't know about you. It is like I woke up this morning and was like, oh yeah, I don't want to go outside today. It's 20
winter.
degrees. And I was going to be smart and convert that to Celsius today for our across the pond friends, but I did not. So I will just simply say it's cold outside. And
the chat room is saying, hold on, before we do that, the chat room is saying Small Business Saturday is what the right answer to that. Small Business Saturday, Giving Tuesday. That's right, Giving Tuesday, Shop Local Saturday, or known as Small Business Saturdays. What about Sunday? Does Sunday not get it gets left out of the weekend then?
And then there's
what doesn't get left out though.
That's right.
It doesn't get left out.
That's right. A nice
maybe it's coffee pour Saturday or Sunday.
That's it. And that coffee is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. Look, here's the beautiful thing. Mark is a very talented, award-winning graphic artist, and he makes really pretty artwork. He's done a lot for me, and there are cheaper places you can go. You can go to Fiverr and get somebody, but here's the thing. Mark is going to sit down with you one-on-one, and he's going to listen to what your show is about, might actually listen to your show, because the whole point is, those guys on Fiverr, they're going to go like, well, what do you want it to look like? Well, that's not your job. That's Mark's job to match your brand with your artwork. And so he's got the marketing brain. If you had a marketing brain, you wouldn't need a Mark. So it's just the best process ever. And, if he'll probably give, I know when I've used him, he gave me like 2 or 3 different options to choose from, which is great because then you can get your community involved to vote on the artwork and just pick the best one. So remember, see, the guy cut me off. I was so close. When they see you before they hear you, and there's only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co.
You said if you didn't have a marketing brain, you wouldn't need Mark. And actually, if you do, you still need somebody sometimes to check your work. I mean, that's just it's just a good idea. So I guess you always need Mark. You also always need. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say what you always need is Dan over there, Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a True Story Podcast, or based on a True Story Podcast.com. I've been mentioning it's the holidays, and if you need something new to listen to, why not check it out? Check it out today, based on a true story, based on TrueStoryPodcast.com. Dan's got some great stuff out there, and a big supporter of the show. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
Yeah, and then of course there's lots of Whiskey Wednesday. I think that's in there somewhere when you
Thursday.
Yeah, when you finally realized what you did with your credit card, like, I need a shot. We do have a question. Thank you, chat room. If you ever want to jump in live, it's right up there. AskThePodcastCoach.com/question. And this is from Stephanie Graham from NosyAF.com. She says, any formulas or quick tips to naming episodes? This is something I really want to improve on. That's a good question. Well, here's a way to think of it. And it's hard for this show especially. But now that's Stephanie's the first question out, that's going to be the name of this episode. But instead of saying maybe how to name episodes, all right, that's what it's about. What's the benefit? So I've heard a bunch of people say this when it comes to episodes. So it'd be like, get more downloads by improving your episode names. Like, what's the benefit of your guest? So if I'm interviewing Jim about robot lawnmowers, I might say something like, "Don't waste your money on junk mowers," or something. It's one of those things. It's kind of tricky because then you also want to throw in what keywords are in there. Please, again, for me, you've hit a button. If you put episode 16, that drives me bonkers. Because you want, I've found a couple articles on this. When your keywords are closer to the beginning of your name, it might actually boost your SEO. And it's, Jim, how do you do? Because you have guests, and that's tricky.
Yeah.
How,
Guest names always go first for me.
Yeah.
That's just my listen. This may not be best practice, so let me immediately say this may not be best practice. But for me, and if you're my guest, you're going to be first, and then I always try to get the most important things up front, like because you only have for eyeball space. Let's not talk about the machine scanning it for a second. Let's talk about humans actually consuming this.
Right.
When they're looking at the title based on the various podcast players and such, you only get, let's just say 60 characters or so before it starts cutting those off. It's different for everything, but let's just say it's around 60 characters. So make sure you've got something, the key thing that you're talking about in the first part of it. Eliminate as much of the filler stuff as possible. If, as, thes, if you can get those out of there in the first 60, because you don't in a lot of cases you don't need them, right? You want to get those key eyeball words up front. I also, because my on Home Gadget Geeks, the episodes have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 different things we talk about. I try to list those in order on it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my regular audience, they don't care. They want to look at the whole title. They'll click in to see the whole title to see what we covered. So sometimes my titles run a little long, but that's kind of how I do it, Dave.
Yeah, it's tricky, really. And this is one of those things where there are 50 best practices. You know what I mean? It's like bowling. Like, how do you do all these things to, keep your arm straight and do this and do that and like, wait a minute, there's only so many, and I'm not even sure what the limit is on how many words you can use before it gets cut off. I think I did that once where I think I typed numbers so I could count how many characters there are. And then that used to be a big deal. And now some of the apps, when you hit play, at least, will scroll the title. So if it's too long, but I always laughed when, you'll see ones like episode 16 of the blah, blah, blah show with Paul, and it gets cut off. And then you find out later it was Paul McCartney. And you're like, wait, what? Why are you?
Yeah. Slide that to the front, my friends. Get that name. I think, listen, if you're having guests, I think you got to get that guest name just as far forward as humanly possible in the title. I don't care, so I put it the very first thing. Now, that actually makes it easier for me when if I'm going to go find or if I'm going to go search for them in my own, so I can see, okay, this person was on here or this person was on there. I mean, I keep a spreadsheet of all that, but it's just visually, and I think it just honors the person to have their name up front.
That's the tricky part, because you want to honor the person, and yet what if it's somebody that what if it's not a known name? Now, it should be a known name in your space, and that's where sometimes I'll be like benefit with person's name, because I want their name in the title, because if people search for them. But if it's like, Jim, Smith, and people are like, what's a Jim Smith? But on the other hand,
Dave, you have a common name, and you've been on my show, and I would say Dave Jackson or Dave Jackson Talks. That's kind of the thing. And then I would list the 2 or 3 things that we talked about on it. And that seems to work for people. I wouldn't obsess too much about titles. I mean, you can, and if you want to, go ahead. You can do anything you want. But I wouldn't get too obsessed about it. However, I would come up with a standard convention that I use on a regular basis and make sure I'm holding tight to that. Because your listeners will, if for the ones that do look at the title, they'll start decoding that and to figure out, okay, here's what's in the episode. if you're always changing the title around on them, that's super frustrating. So if you come up with a pattern, stay with the pattern. The only thing I would say, and you say this all the time too, make sure you get that. If you're going to put the episode number in it, it goes at the very end. Just jam that
That's
thing. Nobody
me.
cares about that thing. Just jam it on the very end
Yeah.
for the most part.
Yeah, I've never. The thing that always, people think they have the answer when I'm like, I really don't even put episode numbers in my title. But if you do, put it at the end and make it EP 16. And people go, well, if I mention another episode, I want to make it really easy for them to find that. And I go,
Yeah.
ooh, great point. Here's a novel idea. If you mention another episode in the current episode, put a link to it in your show notes. Like, don't make the audience go find it. Just go, oh, episode 16. It's click right here. I've done the work for you. So, and Steph makes a point. She's like, look, I don't want some sort of AI solution, because that is something, obviously that's something you can do. What I've done is there are a bunch of them. Well, not a bunch. There used to be like 5, but there are a few websites that are, designated to help you. They'll like grade your title, and all of them now have an AI component. And so what I've done in some cases, again, I don't use AI to make it for me, but I want to brainstorm with it. So I've taken my transcript, thrown it into ChatGPT, and go, what are some great what are titles here that make people want to click? Because in the end, that's what we want them to do. I want a title that makes me click on it. And in true AI fashion, it'll give me, I can say, give me 5 more, give me 5 more. And then what I usually do is I take none of them, but it inspires me to like, ooh, I like this and that. And I'll take part of this and part of that one and this, and kind of come up with my own. But that's really, if you just go, okay, I'm going to come up with 5 different titles on my own. Great. And then just look at them and go, which one would make me want to click? Because that's what we want people to do. So that's kind of the benchmark, is like, which one of these do I want to click more? That's the one you want to use.
I think knowing your audience, and you know your audience, and so that influences you. Like this week, my daughter was on for her annual. Sammy
Oh, yeah.
joins me every Friday after Thanksgiving. We catch up on her life. My audience knows. I don't have to. I could just put in the title Sammy Collison, and they would go, oh, they know what it's about. So the titles for her, like for this episode that I made for her just yesterday, was with updates and a busy 2024. I don't have to get gimmicky in the title. They're going to be drawn. My audience, and they've told me this, they just want to hear more from her. Like, let her talk. She's great. And so, so for me, I don't have to come up with a clickbait title, or, just the fact that we're giving her updates and we're talking about her last year. That's what the audience is looking for. So I guess knowing your audience in that case. And if you're Stephanie, if you're looking for a formulaic way of doing this, think through. This is what I do. Mine is guest name with, and somebody said on, and I kind of like that. That's even 2 letters less. I don't use on enough. I probably should, but and then I list out the 3 or 4 things we talked about if I can, and I try to use product names, because that's the way our podcast is, right? We talk about certain products, Meshtastic or Hondas or robot lawnmowers, like you like to. All of a sudden, Dave, I everything I talk about now from you is a defaulted robot lawnmower. I love it. I love it. I love it. But I try to get those in the title, right? That's my method. Stephanie, I would kind of think through, okay, if I was going to do this, I'm going to start with this, and then I'm going to use this formula to fill out the rest of the title. Figure out what that is, because all of a sudden that actually makes your titling a lot easier when you have a formula base to it. Stick to it for a while. And this is where the AI can help, right? You can plug some things in. You can actually tell the AI, hey, based on this formula, create some show titles for me. So you'll have to mess around with the language on that, but it will do it in a format for you. So that may be, just think through your formula for you. You just may need to get something standard and then start messing around with it.
Yeah. And there are a lot of different strategies. Like she says, well, maybe right now, maybe benefit plus benefit with person name. The other one, like Ralph does the Ask Ralph podcast where it's Christian finance. He finally was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put the name, the question that I'm answering.
Yeah.
Why? Because when people go, what's the best, what do I need to know about 401ks or, should I put my money in a CD or whatever the question is? He's like, I'm just going to use that as the title because that's the answer you're going to get. And then for SEO, people are probably typing in that question. And that's where you can go to YouTube and type in maybe a topic and then go down past the 8 million lists of ads, and they have other questions that people ask. And maybe that's the question you use because people are typing it in for the title. It is a bit of a, it's one of the things, this is one of the things I love about podcasting is it's creative. And so this is one of those where there's 50 different ways to make an episode title. You could use the title of the question that you're doing. You could use benefits and then the person's name. You could put the person's name and then the benefit. And then please light the episode number on fire. Your ego will live. Trust me on that. So it's one of those things where, and here's the beauty of it. I always say your podcast is a recipe. It's not a statue. If you want to go back later and change the title, I remember I did an episode talking about how my great nieces, this is about 5 years ago, got Polaroid cameras, and they screamed like they got free Taylor Swift tickets. Like they completely freaked out. And I looked at my brother and I go, is that a Polaroid camera? And he goes, yeah. And I go, like Polaroid, like shake it like a, like, he's like, yeah. And I go, and they're losing their minds. And he's like, yeah, it's the new thing. And I go, but that's like last year. So I think the title was something like, it was very specific to my nieces and it made sense to me. And I went back about 6 months later and I'm looking at my titles and I'm like, that makes no sense unless you were in the living room with me. It was very inside baseball kind of thing. So I changed the title to something that was more specific to podcasting. So sometimes, you can always go back and change them is my point. So if you go back and you see where you've named your episodes, episode 46, like, that's not a great way to do that. So another question that's coming up, we have one from Ralph, and then the question I see a lot and is, does anybody read show notes? And when I think about it, I've listened to probably 10 podcasts over the last 2 days, and I've not looked at the show notes once. Not at all. Now, if they mention something that I want information about, I'm going to the show notes, and there better be a link. And if there's no link, bad words are going to come out of my mouth because you said all sorts of, like, if we're talking and Jim is like, oh, there's this great Black Friday deal. It's on till the end of the year. And I got it and it's amazing or whatever. Like, I want to, I link to that because if I'm listening to that, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a great deal. And then you go through the show notes and you got all this AI BS and you're like, where is the link to the, whatever, robot lawnmower? We need I'm thinking of getting a robot vacuum cleaner. That's the one that I've almost pulled the trigger on that multiple times until I go, $200 for a robot vacuum cleaner.
No, you should. You should.
Like, I can still push a sweeper. It's really not that hard.
It's worth it. It depends if you have open space. Like if your house is small and crowded and you have stuff everywhere, not helpful. It doesn't move things. Doesn't put things away for you. Doesn't move the chairs in. So, but you ought to get one.
So do you read show notes, Jim?
I do from time to time. Yeah, for the reasons you're saying as well, Dave, which is like, hey, I mentioned this, I'm going to go here. Oh, I want to go back and get it. It's a much easier way of getting to the material than going back and listening to it again and trying to figure it out yourself. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of, I try really, really hard to make sure I've got all the links. And I use 2 summaries in my show notes. So I put the chapter headings in there if they want to just search by chapter, or the Otter puts an extended outline in there that has timestamps and extended notes in there. And I found a few people say, hey, thanks for doing that. That was really helpful for me to get to where I wanted to be. So yeah, not every time and not a lot, but I think show notes are more, this is going to sound weird, but I'm going to say it. Show notes are more for the podcaster than they are for those listening. In other words, I think it's a good discipline for you to go back through and listen to and document and find ways to say, here's what's in this podcast, than just editing and throwing it out to the wind. So I would hope you're spending a little bit. I spend quite a few hours, both in the evening putting the audio together and then the next morning making the show notes for it. And I like, Dave, where my show notes have gone. AI has helped me. I do copy and paste a lot, but show notes has helped, AI has helped me just do better show notes, and I feel better about it. So I would say I think show notes are more for us as podcasters than they are for the audience, but it's a good discipline and a good habit to get into, I think.
Yeah, it's the only other time I was trying to think of when do I look at show notes is if I find, let's say it's a podcast about podcasting and I see the title and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know what they're going to say in this. I will look at the show notes because I'm
Yeah.
trying to decide, should I listen to this? And that's where that opening paragraph really comes in handy. And then Chris from Podcastic Audio says, what gets read first, show notes or show ratings and reviews? I never, as in capital N _ bold, never look at ratings and reviews. I'll give you an example. Seth Wrestler from, I'm going to guess SethWrestler.com. He is the Pied Piper that led half of radio into podcasting. Really nice guy. And he had a thing on Twitter. He said, hey, I'm watching this movie on Netflix called Join or Die. And if you are a person that's into communities, it's a must watch. And because I know Seth, I'm like, well, if Seth said it's good, and he was very I think there were exclamation points, and I went over and watched it. Now it starts slow, but it's based about the guy that did the book Bowling Alone. And he noticed a trend that like in the 50s, everybody smoked and bowled and bowling was great. And then all of a sudden we just people are now bowling alone. And it's this whole thing on where communities thrive, and this sounds stupid, but so does the city. But if your city doesn't have a lot of places where people network, if you think about it, they made up a great point. In the early 70s, you would say welcome to, Poughkeepsie. And it have this big sign, and then it had a sign for the Kiwanis brothers or whatever it is, and the Shriners and all these groups that you could be a part of. And you just don't see those anymore. So word of mouth is what I didn't even read the description of the movie. I went into Netflix, I typed in Join or Die and hit play. And so I'm that same way. I don't know that I ever look at ratings and reviews because half the time, if I ever did, I've looked at them when I've seen people on Facebook and they're like, hey, everybody, let's do a review swap. Then you go over and look at their show and it's like, great show, love the host, great show, love the host, love the host, great show. And they're all Friday at 12:37. And I'm like, gosh, that's odd that everyone was inspired to. So do you ever read reviews? I read my own
No,
when they
not
come in.
podcast reviews. Yeah, not. I can't remember the last time I actually read a podcast review. Now that doesn't mean the informal reviews. When someone says, "Oh, you should listen to this podcast," that's an informal podcast review, right? They're saying, "Hey, you got to listen to this." For a while, I was getting a lot of those, and I was actually hearing some of those through this show, right? As folks in the chat or you would say, hey, have you listened to this? Or, hey, have you listened to that? Oh, there's a helpful part here. That's just, that's word of mouth, but that's just an informal review. I listen to those a lot. If someone's willing to give me their opinion on, oh, you should listen to this. Now, it kind of depends on who and when and how enthusiastic they are about it. You can actually over review something for me where if you're a little too excited about it, I'm going to be like, I probably am not going to listen to that. I don't want to get sucked into that ecosystem. So, but that being said, yeah, I think I trust people when they come, like in this setting. If I'm not looking for a review and somebody in the chat says, hey, you ought to check out such and such, I'm more likely to go try that than I would if I read the reviews online. I listen, I think online reviews are broken.
Well, and I've noticed on AppSumo, if you look at a product, if somebody's done a review of the product, at the bottom, they will have that video. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, except I know one thing. AppSumo has an affiliate program. And I'm like, all right, are they? Because there are people that will review every single AppSumo thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, but, and the one guy actually did a good job because he was like, here's what I like about it. And he actually shows him using the product. That's when I'm like, okay, now I'll listen to that guy versus somebody who it's an AI generated voice and the video in quotation marks is just still images that they're slowly zooming in on. I'm like, yeah, you never use this product. So, um, Chris from castahead.net, awesome supporter, says, feed your podcast transcript into ChatGPT and prompt it to get all the links to products and services that are mentioned in the episode and replace them with your affiliate links when possible. Yeah, that's what's great. I'm Monday's episode on the School of Podcasting is how do I choose a media host? And it's not who's the best media host, because in some cases, what's good for me, like this show has chapters and it has this and it has that. So like right now we're using Buzzsprout, but my favorite AI tool is from Captivate. And they do that. They pull out the links you mentioned and the companies you mentioned, which are, I mean, that's a huge time saver. And so, yeah, it's ChatGPT is, like I say, I'm hanging out with Craig from AI Goes to College. I'm noticing more and more things. Like it's podcast season. So from now through about February, I'm going to get swarmed with new people, which I love. I wish it was that way all year round, but I never had done this in ChatGPT, and I gave it a link to a YouTube video, and because it was like 7 tips on writing a great opening, and I was like, all right, I've kind of got my material on this, but let's make sure I didn't miss anything. And I said, summarize this video link, and it was like, okay, here's the 7 tips, and I'm like, yep, I got all of those. Okay, that's good. And so that's when I was like, man, that's a huge time save. Now I have to trust that the robot is actually, and I'm sure all it's doing is looking at the transcript. It's not like it's watching the movie, but I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So yeah, it's where the other thing I always like to point out with ratings and reviews per Apple, they do not help the algorithm. So when somebody says, and look, they're not lying, they're saying what they've heard 4 million times. And that is, write us, please rate and review us. It helps us get found. And Apple has come out and said it does not help you get found. It is social proof. And, then that's why you should have people rate and review it. But I've never Googled, if I was looking for a golf podcast and there are like 8 million of them, I don't go, well, I'm going with the top rated one. I might do that if I was doing, Jim, are there such things as robot mops? Stephanie Graham is all over. Are there seriously robot?
Yes, there are. Yeah. And there's vacuums and mops together. They do, you change the things. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's all those things.
And the, let's see, how do I feel about, let's do this one. We'll go
hold
ahead.
on. Before, let me finish that with one thought. So there is an exception to this. Dan Lefebvre says, been told by advertisers, I've been told advertisers who've looked at my reviews, see how engaged the audience is before deciding whether or not they sponsor the show. And actually, I got bid at work on this. We were doing some podcast review stuff at work, and my manager's manager was watching one of the YouTube videos that we made, and he goes, well, there's no comments. Like you have, and it's like, well, we don't actually fish for comments. Like, you see a lot of YouTubers who are like, yeah, they throw a question out. If you don't like this, leave what you like in your comments, right? And there's just a lot of content that leads its way towards comments or lends itself to reviews. The stuff we do, we never ask for it. I said, well, that's not why we do what we do. We're not looking for them to engage in that kind of way. But that is a really, really, really good point.
Yeah.
Beyond social proof, there may be money proof.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Dan. Thanks because I've heard that before, and you just reminded me that I need to add that to that. Here's one. If you go to podpage.com/blog, I just did a blog post about this. How do you feel about taking a holiday break during Christmas time? As always, it's your podcast. Do whatever you want. But the thing I always say about this, when you take a break, so let's say it's, Friday night, and because this is how I party, I'm going to go to Walmart and buy groceries because that's what I do on my Fridays, rock and roll. And Podcasting 2.0 doesn't put out an episode. Well, it's not like, I guess I'll just sit here in silence as I drive to Walmart because my favorite show. No, I go find another show to listen in the car. And so what you have to then, and I'm not here, I don't want to be a news station and put fear into you, but if that show is better than the show I normally listen to, because they are part of my routine. That is the like that's the thing you want as a podcaster. I want to be part of your routine. And when you give that up and another show comes in, if it's maybe this much better than the show I was listening to, now when the show I normally listen to comes back, it's like my grandpa was a bread salesman, and he said it was all about fighting for shelf space. He goes, it was a nonstop fight of shelf space, and you did not give up an inch of your shelf space. And so when you take a break, you're just like, okay, here's an empty shelf. Anybody want to put something on that? And so that's the only thing I worry about. And people go, well, who's even going to listen to podcasts? It's the holidays. I don't know about you, but I've got to go in a quiet room, lock the door because I got to wrap presents. All right, well, maybe there's a TV in there, maybe there isn't. But you know what could be with you? Earbuds. And, over and river and through the woods where everybody has their own set of earbuds in because I don't want to listen to dad on the radio. So to me, I don't think it's a great idea, except there's, just like we talked about a second ago, there is an exception. And that's when, because you've decked the halls and you've made the cookies and you've bought the presents and you're just tired and you're frazzled and you're losing it and you're like, I need a break, then take a break. But normally I am, this is where I'm just the weird guy. I don't like on my top shows. I don't take breaks. But Jim, you take breaks. Have you seen it have any like major, like, your people are still there, right?
Yeah, most of my audience is actually behind, so they'll be like, "Oh, whew, I'm getting caught up." What's ironic, coincidental, whatever this is, I took more of a break in November than I will in December, so I'm actually booked solid until January 1st now, all through the month of December. Where the guests, I was busy. There was stuff going on. I couldn't get them all in. I maybe got 2 episodes in November. So I always say, look, go with what you have available. Like if the holiday is busy for you, take some time off. If it's not, for some people, they're just sitting at home. Make more episodes. Like don't worry so much about the break. This is the thing I think a lot of folks worry about. Unless it's 6 months, you're probably okay, right? Maybe in 6 months a little long. I'd say anything over a month or two, people start going, I wonder, you drop out of their collective conscious, right? But hey, if you need it, take it. Like it's fine. You're not gonna. No, I think some podcasters put way more weight on their own, which is fine, right? This is fine, by the way. But they put way more weight on their own podcast than their listeners do, and you're always gonna have one or two of those fanatics who are like, "Where is it?" They don't represent the whole for the most part. Just relax. You'll be fine. Take a week off if you need it. If you can make two, make two. Just go with what the universe gives you during the holiday season. Don't sweat about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And I just say, if you're going to take a break, just announce it. Just like, hey guys, next week, like we do it here. Hey, Dave's going to be in Boston. No show next week, but he'll be back the following week. What you don't want your people doing is going, and this is where if it's like 1 week, assuming you're doing a weekly show, and you come back the next week, it's really not that big a deal. It's when you miss 2 or 3 weeks, like Uncle Marv says, he doesn't do any shows between Christmas and New Year's. So as long as his audience knows that, you're golden. It's when you miss a couple weeks and they don't know where you went. They're like, well, I hope he's okay. I hope she's not hurt. Or I hope, did she quit? Are there no more, so I always say use the more specific, because when you call to get back in the day when people would get cable installed, and they're like, okay, well, the guy will be there somewhere between 9 and 4. I always say I'd rather have bad, accurate news. So if they tell me, hey, he's going to be there about 3. Now, I would rather have that than between 9 and 4. Like, I'd rather it be 9 than not 3. But at least if you give me honest, bad feedback, I can do something else now between 9 and 3. So just keep your audience involved. And, Chris says use holiday season to create a holiday theme maybe and keep it fresh. Yeah, Uncle Marv does a best of. I think Ralph said something he does. That's the other thing to do. If you're going to take a break, here's how you take a break without not taking a break. You ready? It goes something like this. Hey, it's the week of Christmas, and as you might imagine, I'm taking this week off to spend time with my fan and friendly, yes. All of my fan and friendly, my family and friends, and you should too, but if you need something to listen to, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/follow, because while there's no new show today, there are probably shows there, episodes that maybe you missed. So it's not new, but it's new to you. That's right. Go to askthepodcastcoach.com/follow. And of course, when you go there, because Podpage made it for you, there's a link for them to follow the show. And isn't that when they follow your show, you're one more step closer to being part of that routine. So put out a quote new show that says, hey, go look at the old stuff. Because like Jim said, there may be times when your audience is like, I can't keep up with Jim. He puts out too much content. But there's always going to be that person that's like, what? No stuff? And then if they've only been listening to your show for 2 years and Jim's been doing his for 10, well, there's 8 years of stuff there that they missed unless they went back and listened to all the back catalog. So that's another way to put out a, quote, new episode that's not really new, but it's a way to maybe give them something to listen to.
This may be a hot take. I am not a fan of year-end review shows. Like I used to, 10 years ago, I would do those where you're like, hey, let's do the best of, and we'll pull these. One, they take forever to make. Like,
yes, they do.
Right. It should have just made a show. It would have been a lot easier. This is me. Now I'm just saying there may be people who love these, and that's okay if you do, and if you like it. But me personally, those are the first ones I delete. I'm like, oh, year end. To me, that says stale. And I'm like, and you're choosing what I want to listen to. To your example, if I want to go listen to one of the old shows, let me pick the old show. I can go back and go listen to that based on the title or whatever. Like you said, go and follow. But for me personally, I'm like, nah, you're not picking what I want to listen to. Unless it's really well produced or the content fits nicely into that category, especially if I'm a super engaged listener, I've already heard it all. And I'm actually not that interested in hearing it again, especially in a show that's very time sensitive.
Yeah.
A highlight from January of last year, it's probably already, that's old news, right? So for me personally, again, this is me, I'm not going to waste my time putting together a best of episode at the end of the year just to fill a gap. I do not. Now, if your show is if it works for you and you do that and you get great numbers, awesome, do it. If I'm listening and I get a best of show, I'm skipping it. That's just me. That's just me personally. So again, that's a good know your audience, right? Know your audience, and just a show of stuff to fill a gap. I don't know. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's not. I'd question it.
Well, that's where Chris asked this question. He says, Dave, what does your streak actually mean to you? Because I haven't missed a Monday in 19 years. And if I'm going to like really be honest there, that's got to be ego driven or something, because I almost didn't do it last week. I had uploaded the show that I'm going to do Monday. I redid it last night, but I started to put it out and it dawned on me I'd missed a bunch of stuff. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't talk about adding teams to your media host. I didn't talk about this. And I didn't realize that this company had a different business model than I thought. And it's like 10 o'clock. And I have this stupid self-imposed deadline. Like it needs to be out by midnight. And so luckily I had cut a bunch of stuff from that episode. So I uncut it and cut all the stuff about a media host. And I was like, cause it's got to be out at midnight. And I was like, does it it could go out at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. But I was like, and then I really had to sit there and think. I'm like, okay, so we're going with this other content. Like, let's go back. Who's my audience? Are they going to find this valuable? Like, because I don't want to put out stuff just because I don't want to miss my streak, So, but I think it's just one of those things where I didn't start off like, I'm going to do this. I'm never going to miss a Monday. All of a sudden I looked up and it had been 5 years. I never missed a Monday. And I was like, oh, and then it was 6 years. And then, so now it's just this weird. It's just a weird thing that I do at this point. And I will admit, it's just weird. Like, Dave, it's like the world is not going to end if you don't put out an episode. I wouldn't say
it's weird, Dave. I mean, it's consistent, and you're known for that. And the longer you do it, the more the audience is attracted to that. They can be guaranteed they are going to hit an episode every Monday. And so you start attracting people who really value that. And this is where I think it's more important to be consistent. This is again, you're going to argue with me on this one, but I think in some cases it's more important to be consistent than it is interesting. Because consistency, people will depend on, even if you're consistently bad, if people like it, they will keep coming back to it. I mean, why do people watch these reality TV shows? They're consistently bad, but they know they know they're going to be there, right? So
No,
I just
you hit the nail on the. As soon as you said that, I'm like, that's it. Because if in my circle of friends, if you're a person that's like, hey, I've got an emergency, is there any chance you could get over here? I'm the guy that will stop whatever I'm doing because I want to be that guy that you count on. And so that's probably part of it too. So
you're known
excellent.
for that. And people would listen, if you missed a Monday, there would be a giant freak out episode of
Dave's dead.
I mean,
Yeah.
the internet would break for those people that listen to you, right? So I think the consistency part's more important than the interesting part. Now you have to be interesting, right? But there's great value in consistency and predictability as opposed to just interesting.
Well, speaking of interesting, if my Stream Deck would work. All right, my Stream Deck is not going to work. Well, this is fun. All right, hold on. This is real.
We'll do it
this
manually.
is yeah. Well, here's the fun thing. Now I've got to remember how to switch scenes manually. So I go to my eCam. I need to see my scene. Here we go. Scene, show scene window. That's really weird. Well, I said earlier that I was having problems. So we will switch themes to the 3 people look, which is not the 3 people I wanted. We wanted this one. There we go. And now I can, in theory, assign him as guest 2. And we have the one and only Uncle Marv. How are you, my friend?
Good. Nothing better than watching live
Yes.
artistry at work.
That's always fun. I was like, I just clicked the button and I'm like, and that's not doing anything. So that's
Again,
okay.
interesting is consistency is better than interesting, but it's okay. Yeah, we got it.
So I wanted to pipe in. Of course, I was doing other work and I'm listening to the show and I'm listening to all these points about consistency and do you take a break? And like I break all those rules. So I figured, let me come on and explain a little bit more because I get a couple of responses in the chat. And one, going back to the holiday show, I mentioned that I do a year-end holiday show that has, basically become something that people look forward to because we do podcast awards. Listeners vote on their best episode and best guest for the year. And so the guests all want to pay attention to see if they win because they get a mug.
There you go.
And I custom do this mug for them. And so they get a copy of their mug for the year. I have one guest that got upset because he didn't win it one year after winning it the previous year. So he is hell bent on trying to win it again this year. I'm like, dude, it's a mug.
Yeah. Bragging rights.
Yeah.
But your Uncle Marv, your year-end show is an award show, not a review show, right? You're not going back and pulling.
We've done a couple of things where I ask people, hey, what have you liked over the year? And they may recall a specific, episode or, something that somebody said, but no, it is not a full review. I am not going back and cutting and pasting, clips from shows and stuff. Now I may do, like one year I did do bloopers where people were making fun of me every time I would start a show off wrong because I don't edit, remember?
Right.
So they love.
How many hours do you think you put into bloopers? Like, it's a lot of work, right?
Probably a week.
Yeah. It's
like 4 times the amount of work you do for a regular show, maybe more.
I see the folder. I have a folder somewhere on my computer that says Best of 2013. And I started like at every episode, I would try to make a clip thinking that at the end of the year, I'd be like, and here's what we did. And it wasn't part of my normal routine. And after about probably 3 weeks, I just forgot about it. And then it was like, oh, there's that. Oh, I was supposed to be making clip because if you try to do this at the end of the year when you got all the holidays up to your neck and you're like, now I'm going to do a best of show. Good luck with that because as Jim has said, it takes a lot of work because now you have to either have to transcribe everything. That would be the way to do it. Transcribe it and have some sort of AI tool pick the best clips, big giant question mark,
Maybe.
because otherwise forget about it. It's a huge amount of work.
Yeah.
Fun. Well, there
Hey,
you
Uncle
go.
Marv, how much does it cost? How much does that mug cost you? There's a lot of bling. There's a lot of bling on that mug.
Uh, so the mug itself, so I
Yeah.
make these myself. So I
Oh.
actually have
Okay.
a sublimation printer. I have a heat press for the mugs. The mug itself is only like $4 or $5, but of course the printer and the process and stuff, it's about $1,000 to get started properly. But then you just use it for everything. I make mugs for family reunions. I make mugs for friends.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
So you're not buying those. You're not buying them individually or have somebody else do them. If I were to say to you, "Hey, I need a mug, Uncle Marv. I need a mug. Can you make a mug for me?"
Yeah.
What would you charge me to custom make a mug? What do you think that would? Now,
So it's either,
just know that you're going to have people contacting you after this for custom mugs.
that's
So
all right.
give me a good price. Would you do one?
So,
Would you do it? And two, is there a price?
well, I would do it. Of course, I'd have to, ask a whole lot of stuff of what you wanted. But
Yeah.
basically, this is an 11-ounce mug, and these run about $15
Okay.
from start to finish to customize it and do all the stuff. And then I also do 15-ounce mugs for $20.
Okay. So do you have a way of folks buying those if they wanted to do it now? Is there a way folks could do that with you?
So the short answer is I have something on Ko-Fi, but that was mainly for uh, my listeners. I'll have to bring something up there. But I do have a Ko-Fi page that I
Okay.
have people. It's not like a standard, buy an IT business mug,
Okay.
all
I'm
the time.
just trying to get you some business. I was just trying to
Yeah.
some business.
Well, what's the website for your podcast?
So I've got 3, but the one that we're talking about now is itbusinesspodcast.com.
There you go.
And of course, if you just want to see everything, go to unclemarv.com and all my shows are there.
That's easier to remember, just to be honest. Uncle Marv, right? UncleMarv.com. Let's check it
Marv.com.
out today. Yeah.
There you
All right.
go.
Thanks, Marv.
I'm
All
gonna
right,
click
guys.
I'm gonna
Thanks
click
for
a button.
jumping in.
We're gonna pretend this works. So if I hit this button to go back to just 2 people, oh, there you go. Now it decided to work. Who knew? So weird.
Love that Uncle Marv.
Yeah.
Love that Uncle Marv.
Great
He has a
guy.
good podcast. That's another good one to if you're kind of an IT nerd. They get pretty technical on that show. It's a good one to listen to.
All right. Well, speaking of cool people, let's do this. And then Ralph has been sending in tons of questions that are really good I want to get to. So, but let's think, speaking of awesome people like Ralph, this is going to be weird if he then wins the Wheel of Names. So, I think that was it last? Yeah, it was last week. I think that he won.
We got close, or
I'm clear. There we go. This show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting. If you're looking to start a podcast in 2025, my first question would be, why are you waiting? That's the one I always see. Going to start something in January. I'm like, there's a month and a half left of this year. You could be up and going by January. But go over, use the coupon code COACH when you sign up. And that, of course, that includes unlimited coaching. And we use Podpage for Ask the Podcast Coach, which now has Podroll. So if you're using Buzzsprout or I think Transistor for your media host, we will suck in that Podroll and you can put that on your website if you want it. If you don't want it, then you don't. So check it out at trypodpage.com. And we use Ecamm Live to stream live. So if you want to check that out, it's at askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm, and Ecamm has 2 M's. And if you need more Jim Collison, and hey, who doesn't need more Jim Collison? Then go over. Now, isn't that supposed to make confetti fly or something when you?
No, I have it turned off. Yeah, I have it turned off.
Go over to theaverageguy.tv, and it's time for the Wheel o' Names. So, I see there's Chris. It's weird. I have this so small now I can't read it. But Ross Brand is on there. The ladies from Keep the Flame Alive. We'll spin it around and see who it lands on. These awesome supporters. And it looks like, yes, it is Jody Kringle. Yay. from the Audio Marketing Podcast. I will put a link to that in the show notes. And of course, you probably just heard me mention her, because one of the things I do is whoever is the awesome supporter of the week, I mention them and I make it a pre-roll. I'm like, today's show is brought to you by Jody Kringle, and then there'll be a link to her show. So Jody is awesome. Thank you so much for being an awesome supporter. And if you want to be an awesome supporter because you go, you know what, this show saves me time, it saves me money, it saves me headaches, and it makes me think, maybe keeps you educated, well, then you can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and be an awesome supporter today. And you don't have to spend $20. There's $5 and $10 people as well. And so let me go over here because where'd he go? Ralph asked, how do you effective? That's the hard word. That's what makes this question hard. How do you effectively grow and engage with your podcast audience between episodes to maintain momentum and build a loyal community? That's where Heartbeat, Facebook, Reddit subgroups, whatever you want to use to have a community, something to talk to them in between, newsletters, social media, and that's where you go effective. And I'm like, well, some people are really effective on social media because they're not using social media for promotion, where it's episode 16 is out. They're being social on social media. They're those people. Facebook groups sound easy, and they can be great, but getting people to interact in there, it's kind of a tough thing. Jim, you have 8 million people in your Facebook group.
Yeah, we have a lot, but we have a product. Like, this is one of those areas. We have a very popular product that's got a lot of marketing behind it, a lot of drive, a lot of momentum. Would I have that many listeners if it was just a general strengths podcast and I wasn't known to work for the company that makes this? Probably not. I don't think I'm that interesting. There's a number of every year. There's a number. I was going to look this up, but you called me in a little too early. Every year there's a number of small businesses that start and fail, and they're good ideas and they have a lot of passion behind them. They just fail for a variety of reasons. In the podcasting, I've said this 1,000 times, but in the podcasting world, it's like starting a small business. And working hard does not necessarily guarantee success. You're going to need a little bit of luck. You're going to need a little bit of exposure, and you're going to have to work your tail off. Now, every once in a while, there's somebody who strikes it rich, just easy, and it just happens. But that's such a small percentage. I think everybody who's been successful doing what they're doing at the end of the day goes, man, I'm exhausted. It's a lot of work. And so you may think, Ralph, this isn't directed to you. This is just generally. You may think you're working hard. You're probably not working as hard as you think you are. And there'll be exceptions there to that. But folks, the successful ones almost always are like exhausted, like literally exhausted. There's like, yeah, I'm doing everything I can every second of the day. Listen, they also sacrifice a lot. This is one of those areas I don't think we take into enough account. Lots of times, very successful things, whatever they are, they've sacrificed something or some things to get where they want to be. Be careful about, is your podcast worth your family, or is your podcast worth your children, or is your podcast worth your health? You make that decision. You can do anything you want, right? But is it? So I'm a little cautious on, like, I think for those, continue to work hard, continue to find those areas of things that make you successful, continue to work those things. Just be very, very careful in the process and decide who will you serve. We know you can only serve one master. So just be careful on this, that it doesn't become, it doesn't hurt you, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a great point. If your spouse or your children are complaining about your podcast, that is not a little red flag. That's a big one. And that red flag can get very, very, very expensive. Yeah. So be careful with that. But it's hard to figure out, well, where is my audience? Especially when every I don't know, 3 years, everybody goes, well, I'm not over there anymore. I'm now on Mega Schmegel. And then 3 years from that, we're like, no, I'm on Blinky. It's the new social thing. We're all on Blinky. And then 2 years later, they're like, well, I don't like the owner of Blinky, so I'm going to go over to Schmortimer. And you're like, what? And it's hard to figure out where everybody is to then get them together. It's it's a bummer. He says, as you know, I'm doing a live show each Tuesday night. I have decided that I'm going to bring on someone and give them free financial coaching as part of the show. If anyone is interested, go over to AskRalphPodcast.com. That is a fun way. I tried that, and my audience, I'm going to probably try it again. But I did one of them was Stephanie, and another one was, I forget, Tina did one, and I did a kind of NPR style of replaying their review, and my audience did not respond well. They're like, wait, this isn't just Dave. And I was like, it got really bad scores. And I was like, they did not like that format, or they just don't like that idea. Ralph says, I do a daily show for Christmas, and I'm going to take a few episodes and do a look back at the best of 2024. Again, that's, unless you've started working on that, that's a lot of work, and add some new ideas to the shows.
Well, his content, though, financial content, may be timeless, right?
Right.
So there may be some things if your show lends it way to it, but if your stuff is timely, I don't know. Listen, you can do whatever you want. I don't listen to.
And then maybe I didn't star this one. He was talking. Oh, here it is. I probably will not do the Tuesday evening live show on Christmas Eve. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. Spend time with your friends and family. And New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve to me is, I've never understood why that's a holiday. I know some people have great memories of New Year's Eve. I do not, because I think I'll have a very small audience. That is true. You're competing against Ryan Seacrest and, Megan Thee Stallion and all sorts of other bands I've never heard of, but have not decided completely at this point. On your thoughts? Again, it's a holiday. For me, my knee-jerk reaction is like, you're not going to get any flack from anybody when, if your show is normally Thursday night and you didn't do it because it was Thanksgiving, I don't see your audience going, well, I'm not listening to Ralph anymore. He didn't show up on Thanksgiving. Wimp. I was here. I'm like, no. So, I would not do that unless you really want to. Like for me, when he said that, I was like, because I've seen people do this. They'll just go online and they'll make a super easy link to pull people in. And it's not even a podcast. They just want to hang out with people, and they'll just do a live stream. And it's just hey, come hang out and talk. And sometimes you get 3 or 4 people in there, but unless there's nothing else going on, there's a lot of competition that time. I don't know. What do you think, Jim? Anything? Same thing?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, same thing.
Let's see what else. Todd the Gator said, I just started live shows, and my question is, do you have scripts or show notes, or just roll with it? Well, Jim knows.
Yes. You have all of them. In some cases, so live, I think some cases scripts are not bad. For certain things that you're doing, I think the more live you are, the more scripted your intro and outro are, the better off you are. So you don't forget things. Also, I think you script segments if you need to. If you're going to do regular segments on a live show, if you've got that thing scripted and memorized, or scripted and well read, it just makes a more comfortable transition between things. So I think there's appropriate areas for scripts. We, on live shows, we have found great success in outlining them, but we almost never follow the outline word for word. But it's there. Like, over prepare and then underuse. You're better off that way. If you get in there and then you're not prepared, that thing will fly all over the place, right? So just make sure it's going to, even with a solid outline, it's going to fly all over the place. So make sure you're doing that. And then we do this sometimes here on this show. Don't bow too much to the live audience. Like, you can let them distract you. You can let them take you off the rails. You can let them move the show in a direction it wasn't intended to go. So, but we get great value out of the live audience. We get questions from you. We get comments. I think Dave, you and I figured out how to use that to the best of our ability and to to the best of the, we don't get a lot of complaints from those who don't come here live that we bend too much to the live. But I would say yes to all those things. Make sure you have some things scripted out. Make sure you have a plan of where you're going to go. Make sure you understand how to manage the chat room live. Not everybody's good at that. We've gotten better at that post-pandemic. Zoom taught us all how to do chat and talk at the same time. That was amazingly not a talent that existed before the pandemic for most people. So yeah, yes to all those things, Dave. That's what I would say.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like anytime I've ever tried to do this show solo, like Jim will be like, "Hey, I got to leave like a half hour early," and I'm like, "All right, I'll just do that last half hour by myself." That's when, like, as Jim was talking, I was listening to him, but I also going through the chat. And if there's no Jim to talk, so I can go look at the chat, then you just have to do a time. And I saw a guy on radio this week, the morning guy here, and he had some sort of chat thing going, and he was like, "All right, let's see what's going on in the chat." And for like, I don't know, 10 seconds, he was like, "Yeah, all right." And I'm like, wow, this is radio, and it's, I was like, okay, so he's very comfortable with dead air. And for me, the other thing I would do is I would be in the middle of a topic and somebody would say something cool in the chat and I would squirrel off like nobody's business. I'd be like, and that's how I made $100. Oh, wait, this guy wants to know what microphone is. And I'm like, wait, I didn't even finish my thought. So you have to be, if you're going to do live, you almost have to go, all right, I'm talking to the audience and I'm just going to take a second and look at the chat, because that's the hard part, because you want to, you kind of want to don't ignore the people that are there with you live. But on the other hand, it's you are multitasking. And speaking of that, Dan says Dave Crenshaw's book, The Myth of Multitasking, is a great read for anyone who thinks they can get it all done at once.
Yes.
It
Yes,
is
it is.
It's a
Yes,
great
it
book.
is. We think, and listen, we always think we're better. Like the turn it on and just talk and it'll be interesting is a lie. Like, it is not interesting in some cases. You just out there babbling about something may or may not be interesting to people.
Right.
So be like, live in itself is not engaging unless it is. And so the medium itself, I think a lot of folks are like, turn on the microphones and let's just go live. And then you hear them get in there and stumble around and they're awkward with it. And then you feel their awkwardness and you're like, oh, I'm out. Like, I can't handle that secondhand embarrassment. I'm just like, I'm out of here. So just live is not interesting. Like, I hate to break that to a lot of folks. We'll just turn our microphones on and it'll be great. No, actually it won't be. It could be, but it probably won't.
Well,
like, it takes some effort to take some time. It takes some practice. Get good at it. If you're going to do it, don't just do it once. Like, you really need to spend some time in the space.
Yeah, it's and the fun part of live is you kind of need to pick a time that people know you're going to be there, because if you bounce all over, it's hard. John wants to know, is this live? It's 11:33 as we speak. Yeah, we are live right now as we do this. If you're watching this after 12 o'clock on Saturday, it's not live, but we're here every Saturday, 10:30 to noon. Go ahead.
I was just going to say 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern, if you want to join us live every single week.
Ralph says dead air is okay on the show. I heard that directly from Eric K. Johnson, and he's a radio guru. Yeah, he's a program director for iHeart.
I don't agree with that, by the way. I don't think that's true. I mean, Eric's a good friend.
Yeah.
And he lives in town, but I don't know if it's okay.
Like, dead air on a podcast. It was, I think maybe that's what he means. I don't know. Because, well, I mean, think about the king of dead air was Paul Harvey.
Yeah, but that's not awkward dead air. There is
that's true.
Intentional dead air. There's spaces, and there's hosts that create spaces. We all expected that from Paul Harvey, right? We all expect that from Jim Rome. Jim Rome is the king of it, right? We expect that from him. If that's your style, fine. But if you're doing some stuff and you just have these you and I are talking, blah, blah, we're going back and forth. And then for 20 seconds or 30 seconds, there's just this weird dead air where you and I are trying to figure some things out. That, my friends, especially if it's a problem, that is awkward. So I'm sure that's not what Eric meant in that. There's a style of leaving space, right? I'm sure that's what he meant in it. But awkward dead air, either you need to edit that out or make sure it doesn't happen live, right?
Yeah, it
And
would
it's
be
okay. Listen, if you do it, it's okay. It's just not great. I don't think
it would be weird just for giggles. All right, we're gonna try something here. We're not gonna say something for 10 seconds, and you'll be amazed at how long 10 seconds is because it doesn't
But
sound
you
like that.
announced it. You announced this
And I
thing. But we'll go
announced
ahead and
it.
do it. We'll
All
go
right,
ahead.
here's 10 seconds of dead air. There you go. There's your 10 seconds. Longer than you think it is.
It's a great alarm on
Every
there. It
every
is a long.
everybody else is going 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi.
Well, the for me, where this comes into play on the live programs that we do, I tell my guests, hey, at the end of the show, I'm going to say, with that, we say goodbye, everybody. That's my out.
Yeah.
That is my outro. That's how we know we're done. And I'm going to say, I need you to sit at the camera and stare at it and smile. It's going to feel like 1,000 years. It's 5 seconds, but I need you because we're going to fade it out. And I need you not to, I just look at the camera and smile. Those are the moments where it feels like it's forever, and so it is. There are moments in your podcast, and if you're doing it live and you have a moment, you need to cough or you need to get away from the mic or you need to, just do it. Just make sure you cut that out and I know this, just make sure you cut that out when you go make that part of the podcast, right? Make sure you have a good system to do that, because just remembering it isn't going to work, and unless you listen to the whole thing over again. If you're doing that, that's fine. That's your system. But if you don't have some kind of system to mark those moments, you'll miss and forget. I've heard those where I've heard people are like, edit this point. They'll be talking on the podcast and they'll go, oh, edit this. And they obviously missed their own edit point in the podcast, right? You have to have a good system.
Well, and the other thing that if we compare this to radio, the one thing radio has that this show doesn't is live ads, right? So it'd be like, hey, we'll be back right after this. Well, that guy's going to the bathroom. He's talking to his producer while they're playing 2 minutes of ads. And then they come back. They're like, all right, Jane from Poughkeepsie, you're on with Biff and the, bushwhacker or whatever. And so they do have these little breaks to kind of catch themselves. And when you're actually live and you are an army of one, that's what makes it really tough. A live solo show is not something that I have tried a couple times, and I'm like, it's as you do it, you get better. So as Jim said, if you do it once and go, oh, that's ridiculously, you learn from each one. Like for me, I would have to just every now and then, just like, okay, let's see what the chat room has to say about this, and then just be happy if there wasn't anything in the chat. The thing I've done probably once or twice a quarter is I will start to read a chat message that I haven't read all the way through, and halfway through realize, oh, I shouldn't be reading this live, but that's just the joy of live. And you're just like, okay. And then you finish it or you stop mid thing and go, oh, that's really not for me. Never mind. And you move on. But it's live. Live is a different beast. It really is. And if you're doing things like us, where we have people jumping in live with no screener, I realize I've opened myself up for that. But when Uncle Marv jumped in on, you'll hear, well, I'll mute it, but I now have it make a noise because I went back and looked one time and somebody was waiting for us to let them in and I didn't know they were there. Mm-hmm. And so you learn from every experience. And that's when I listen to my old ones where I'm just bouncing back and forth all over the place. I'm like, okay, that's horrible to listen to. So you just got to learn with every experience and do what you can. Ralph says, but you do see, here's one I didn't read all the way through, but I think it's fine. You do need to cut it out of the audio. I have found my listeners just assume there'll be those edit points and expect them. Yeah. So meanwhile, Chris and Randy are arguing about Blue Sky in the chat room. So be nice, people.
They're not. They're having a nice.
They're having a nice dialogue. Yes.
I've been monitoring just to make sure it doesn't get carried away. So
yeah. And Ralph says he assumed that both Jim and I were wearing adult diapers. No, we're
I got my prostate fixed last year at this time, so I'm good to go. I had surgery to
yeah.
take care of that. Hey, that's coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that. That's kind of nice.
There you go.
Yeah.
Todd says, I have a co-host now, and as they are speaking, I will look over the chat. That's the key. Doing this solo would be,
Yes.
yeah.
The hard part on that, Dave, is when you have an unpredictable co-host that you don't know. Listen, I know you start looking over, and I'm like, okay, I can go for a while.
Mhm.
Dave's catching up on things, and I'll give him some time, and I'll say some things, right? But when you have and this is where working together really matters. When you have an unpredictable co-host, and you say you need to read the chat room, you throw me a question, and I go, yeah, that's dead air. Like, 'cause
Yeah.
you just engage with the reading, and as much as you say you're listening, you can't really multitask. And so there's moments where you're like, oh crap, like there's dead air. What did he say? How do I recover from this? So you have those knowing your co-host, if you're going to do it that way, or co-hosts if you're going to have multiple people do it, I think is really important.
Yeah. The other fun thing, 2 words that can really ruin a live broadcast, and those, of course, are explosive diarrhea. And that's where having adult diapers comes in handy. We've had that happen once where I was like, Jim, I'll be right back. And yeah, that was not a lot of fun.
Keep some Pepto-Bismol. Not that they're a sponsor of this show or any of those kinds this long podcast sponsored by Pepto-Bismol.
This awkward pause is brought to you by
when you feel like
it can be like
when you feel like going, it will keep you in your chair.
Yeah. It's one of those where it's like, hey, the next 2 minutes of awkward silence are brought to you by Pepto-Bismol as I run away and have to do things that are not fun. Yeah. Dan says, I've had that happen with guests too. Not to even being live, sometimes answering an open-ended question with, yeah, throws me off for a moment. Yeah, that's no fun when number one, try not to ask yes or no questions, but we all do that. But if I forget who it was, there was somebody back on the day, it's a YouTube video, and somebody I think decided to just be the world's worst guest. And it was Johnny Carson. And he's like, so, have you ever done the blah, blah, blah? And they're like, yeah. And he's just kind of like, so was it fun? Did you have a good time? And she's like, mm-hmm. And you could just tell he was like, okay, this is a talk show and you are not talking. So that's always tricky. I have probably once or twice in the middle of an interview, just not like scolded the guest, but just said, hey, I'm going to turn this conversation more towards this now because I want to really get into the meat and potatoes of this. But it was kind of like they kept going on tangents. And I was like, all right, we're kind of here to talk about this kind of thing. Yeah. So it's always kind of fun. But to go back to, I think it was Todd the Gator that said something about scripts or things like that. When we started the show today, I went to my NoteJoy account and I'm like, okay, we've got like 7 or 8 questions that I've gotten from Reddit and things like that. And I looked at them and they weren't phenomenally great questions. They weren't bad. I was like, all right, if nothing else is happening, we can go to NoteJoy, and it's 11:43. And now is the first time I'm like, all right, do we need to go to NoteJoy at this point and see what's going on? Because I said at the beginning of this, I go, Jim, this might be one of those where it's like, I hope the chat room has something. And I was so happy that like the minute we started this up and the chat room shows up on my side of things, you guys had already been having your own conversation out there. And I was like, holy cow. So I've always planned the show that nobody's going to show up. And if nothing else, Jim and I can just talk about a bunch of questions that I've pulled from Reddit and Facebook and things like that. Just because you never know, but it's never that case. I always have extra questions hanging around or whatever and things of that nature. So
if we ran out of questions, couldn't we just end the show too? Like,
yeah, we could.
Well, and I think we have shortened it up at times. Be like, well, we got 5 minutes, but we're done. Let's just you start playing the music in there, and it's like, okay, we're wrapping.
And we haven't talked about the elephant in the room. We talked a little bit about Black Friday and Silver Tuesday and Red Wednesday. Like How did you get anything for Black Friday?
Oh, Dave, I did. I Restream had a great deal that basically took it back to StreamYard pricing. So I took advantage of that for a year. I have to admit, and I don't know, maybe nobody else has this problem. I get completely overwhelmed by Black Friday. It's actually, it's just this year that I'm figuring out the emotional detachment that I have with this. In years past, I'd get super angry on this weekend, and I would just be like, I'd just be stressed, and I didn't know why. I think this year I'm kind of figuring out just the overwhelming sheer amount of options that you have, and the sheer capitalism that happens. I'm not against it, but the sheer capitalism that happens during this holiday, I don't like it. It's too many deals to follow. It's too much. Listen, I love shopping a deal. There is nobody loves shopping a deal better than this guy, and I am super cheap, and I love it when I get a deal. I won't buy things unless it's a deal. And sometimes I'll find a deal and I still won't buy it. Right? That's how bad I am. But the Black Friday mania that happens just is so, I shut everything off. I delete all the emails. I don't want to know. It's just too much for me. So maybe if you're in that situation, you don't know it. You're frustrated with things. You didn't know why. At least for me, it is a struggle. And so I am so glad when Black Friday and Cyber Monday are over and we get back to some normalness, and I can kind of track deals on a slow burn instead of this. The other thing I've thought of, Dave, and I don't know if you've thought of this, but I'd love to just save all my purchases for the year for this one day. I mean, you kind of think
Yeah.
everything's on sale this day. I just can't operate that way. Like, I wish I could. I wish I could save all my money and on this Friday you just buy everything, but that life doesn't work that way. And
Right.
so I'm just super overwhelmed by it. And
Well,
this year I'm discovering I can't. It's okay to just ignore everything and let the weekend. I did nothing yesterday. I literally didn't. I bought nothing. I did nothing. It was awesome. So
well, it's weird because you go from I didn't know these deals were available because you're 7, right? And then
right.
there comes, and then you start to pay attention, and you get a couple deals, and you're like, oh wow, this is amazing. And then your level goes up. All right, I'm ready for this year, and at this point, you're kind of approaching fear of missing out. That if I don't look at every email or something, I'm going to miss the one big deal that everybody else got, and I missed it. And then the next step is kind of where you're at, where you're like, I can't keep up. I know I am where you are yesterday. I just was like, I scanned for 3 seconds and was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what these are, and blah, blah. And I just deleted them all. And it was, for me, it was like a really annoying kid poking at your leg, right? Going, daddy, daddy, daddy. And you're like, what? And I would go in and delete literally like 60, 70 emails. And then for the next 10 minutes, I could have muted that tab, but I just kept hearing ding, ding, which means I have mail. And just like nonstop, just ding, ding. And like another 30 seconds, ding, ding. And you'd go over and it'd be more of them going, daddy, daddy. You're like, ugh. So I delete, and it was just like this never ending, just for, the whole day. You're just like, holy cow. So, by the end of the day, I was like, I don't care anymore. And I think that's kind of where you're at. Like, you know what?
Yeah, for sure.
Let me know when they're gone, and I will come back out of my hole. It's crazy.
Yeah,
So.
well, I use Slick Deals and Honey to track deals throughout the year when I need them, and this is a good time to buy. I don't want to buy anything. I was checking my email as you were talking. I thought, I bet I have 25 emails. I deleted all my emails before the show, so I was 0 inbox before the show. And I was like, I bet I have 25. And Amazon is already like saying Cyber Monday deals are here.
Yeah.
You're like, man, let the paint dry on Black Friday, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's just insanity. Now, okay, that being said, if you can, certainly the best prices of the year, especially on a lot of services, on a lot of subscriptions, is right now. Just know the more you buy, and somebody mentioned this in chat, you're going to have a November glut of things expiring that, you have to make a decision on. And if you set automatic, many of them just subscribe automatically, right? I mean, there's
2.
Yeah, and they're going to be more expensive if you don't cancel them. What I have found on some of these is, what I need to do is set an early or late October cancel, right? In October, late October, let's just call it cancel October. And you cancel all your stuff, and then they'll resend you new deals. I did
Yeah.
this with my VPN service. Canceled it in October. They sent me a 75% discount. Hey, come back and we'll give you 75% off. You say yes to that every time, right? So you gotta put some things in place to make sure that you're not screwing yourself by, in this case, I think there was once, what, Peacock or Paramount, one of those is doing a $20 for a year. That's going to renew at $80 next year. So
Yeah.
you just be careful. Set some boundaries.
I had two companies. One, I don't know if I ever logged in, that had sent me a thing for the year and a video thing that, again, I think I used once. And I just politely said, hey, I'd like to cancel this. And if possible, can I get a refund? Because if you look, I haven't logged in. And that doesn't mean, look, if I have Netflix, I don't watch any movies. I can't go, hey, can I get a refund? I didn't watch anything. And to their credit, they were very nice. They canceled my subscription and they refunded it. But if they'd said, nope, you can use it all year and it won't renew next year, but we don't do that. Too bad. You know. And they did say they sent a thing saying you're going to get charged. And I'm like, I'm not that, or it went to spam.
I would set up a computer just to stream it 24/7. I might not even be watching it, but if they're going to charge me for it, I'm going to use all the possible bandwidth I can on their services at that point,
Yeah, that's just good old customer service to give it back. But that's a good point, man. Next, I'm going to make a note in October next year, like to remind everybody, hey, your Black Friday deals are going to renew in about a month.
Yeah.
So
November 1st, on November 1st, All Saints Day, not Halloween, because you're you're sugared out. On November 1st, All Saints Day, leave yourself a note to it, not All Saints, but cancel all subscriptions on November 1st. So you make sure they don't automatically renew.
Yeah. One last question. Ralph says, what are each of your New Year's resolutions for your shows?
I don't have any. I haven't made any yet. I don't do resolutions.
Yeah.
I try to be consistent throughout the year.
Yeah. I mean, personally, my resolution is the same thing as last year. Be more focused and lose some weight. That's been my resolution for about 10 years now, and I'm failing miserably. For the show, in December, you'll hear, if you go to this show, askthepodcastcoach.com/survey, you can fill in a survey about this show, and I'm doing another survey for the School of Podcasting. So I'm going to be really hitting that hard in December, telling people, please go to, schoolofpodcasting.com/survey and fill that out. And then from there, I will make decisions based on user feedback. And that's the thing you have to kind of ask yourself, are you willing to change your show? Like I do a weekly show, and if they go, we love the School of Podcasting, we wish it was daily. I'm like, great, I'll go clone myself. That's not happening. I can't do that. So, but if they said it's too long, am I open enough to go, yeah, maybe we don't need to hear the where am I going segment every week, things like that. So you have to be, the worst thing you can do is ask your audience for feedback and then ignore every ounce of it. Unless they're really telling you to do a completely different show, because have fun getting feedback in the future if you don't do anything with it. So that's what's kind of tricky about it. But yeah, resolutions, to me, New Year's Eve is not a holiday. I've never understood it. I was tortured with Guy Lombardo growing up, and I forget who else was on. All the kids would run and hide and find Dick Clark's Rockin' Eve or whatever. But at this point, those shows are not for me. Right, those are for 20-year-old kids who are staying up. They're not trying to, what are the middle-aged 50-year-old guys looking for? I'm like, come on, bring me some Lita Ford,
Michael Bublé.
Yeah,
that's what we're looking for.
But so my goal every year for my show is to find out what my audience wants and give it to them, and then politely and confidently and compassionately get them to sign up for the products and services that I offer so I can eat and pay off loans and all those other fun-filled things. And that part doesn't change. And then look at those things that I don't like doing and see if I can either A, not do them anymore, or like this show is now edited by Descript. I do not do the select all filler words and remove them. But I do have them remove and which is kind of dumb. We talked about this last week. It's a live show. but I let it do the editing. I let it do the chapters, where before I went through and did all the chapters, and it used to take me like 4 to 5 hours just to edit the show. And now it takes me about an hour and a half. So I got a big chunk of my Saturday back, and I've yet to have a single person go, "Hey Dave, it sounds like that's an automated edit." Like, nobody's complained. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to keep doing that. So anything that can save me time while still delivering value, I will do that. And then the hard part is, like, I'm doing something tomorrow with my brother. That's Sunday. Well, everybody knows Sunday is podcast day. Don't bug Dave on Sunday. It's podcast day. So I got to go help him do some stuff. So I am doing a bunch of things today because, again, family comes first. And so that just means I'm kind of sacrificing my Saturday. So that's the other thing to always keep an eye on. As much as we love to focus on our audience and our podcast, always have your eye on your family, because you only got one of those, and that's much more valuable than, the 30 people listening to your show. That's we get kind of it's a dopamine thing probably when we see our numbers go up, I would imagine. But,
Oh yeah, it's approval, right? I mean, it's recognition. Those things, they matter. They're important.
Yeah.
Strive for them. Try to get them. I think from a goal setting standpoint, if you're only setting goals at the end of the year, that's like budgeting once a year, and we know that doesn't really work. You kind of, I would much prefer a set of rolling goals that you review at the end of every month. If that's what you're going to do, I'm constantly thinking about, okay, where are we headed with this? What are we doing with that? In get in a constant mode of it, instead of, and most people listening here know this, instead of one time a year sitting down, like, where do we want to go the next year? One, I don't think the end of the year as an arbitrary reset is smart. Like there's just not, yes, there's some unique things that happen, like paying taxes that we do once a year. Maybe some of those kinds of things are smart to look at the end of the year. But I'd slow roll it every month at a minimum, and just kind of say, hey, I've got these things. I should be looking at this at least on a monthly basis, if not at the end of the week. I had a really strong discipline for budgeting every Saturday for a lot of years, and that just really worked in my favor. Now I kind of budget maybe every other week. I've got a rolling budget that I work on. So yeah, hey, if it works for you and you can do goals at the end of the year, and that's a smart way to do it for you, go for it. I just don't find it as effective for me. I need to be constantly thinking at least once a month at the end of the month. Hey, where are we at? Where are things? Because things change.
Well, it is, and today's the end.
Yeah,
Today's the end of the month, and I will spend a chunk of today going around and gathering up all my receipts for expenses and things for the School of Podcasting. And but yeah, it's one of those things I should do. I kind of do on Sunday. I kind of look at the week coming up, going, okay, what do I got? Who am I coaching? What's going on? And that's always a good, if you can't do weekly, then do monthly. But it's like you said, you don't want to find out, oh wow, I just spent 12 months doing the wrong thing. You kind of want to take your pulse every now and then to see what's going on and make sure you're doing the right things. Right now, I've played with a thing called Motion, which is an AI scheduling tool. It was a little expensive, and it's a little more robust project management. So if you have a project and it has multiple stages, and then I just found Reclaim, which is a little cheaper, and the same thing. You put in your habits and you put in your tasks, and then it looks at your calendar and goes, oh, look, you have an hour here. Let's put that exercise habit here. And so I it's interesting. The thing I don't like is if I decide to do something a little longer and I had that hour for exercise, it shows that I exercised for an hour. And I'm like, nope, I didn't. I kind of needed to like ask me, hey, did you exercise? And I go, yes. Because then it makes reports based on what was in your calendar. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't really do that thing. I got stuck doing something else, or my coaching call went long or something like this. But there are some AI tools, but in theory, I get the point, and it's kind of neato that, it moved this onto my calendar. But I'm like, yeah, but kind of don't you know what you need to do? So it's kind of interesting. But hey, whatever works for you, just stay productive and don't forget to leave time to chill out and don't burn yourself out doing all that stuff. So, Jim, what is coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, Sammy, my daughter.
Yeah, I'm gonna say. Go ahead.
Sammy, my daughter, joined me as she did for the annual. We do this every Friday after Thanksgiving. big updates this year because she was in an auto accident. She was fine, but and then of course she had a new job and some other things going on. So she talks about all those processes of going through getting a new job and using AI for resume writing and the new car and researching and buying a new car in 2024. Those kinds of things available right now. HomeGadgetGeeks.com.
Now, do your other kids go, "Hey, Dad, how come Sammy gets interviewed and I don't?"
No. I've had Phil, my oldest. I've had
Yeah.
him on, and I think I've even had John on. I can't remember. Josh isn't interested in it, and Tim would never do it. So it works out pretty well that way.
There you go. Well, on the School of Podcasting, I mentioned it earlier. It's over an hour long episode, and it dawned on me that as I was doing it, we always say your episode needs to be as long as it needs to be, and that's it. And I looked up and I was like at the 55-minute mark, and I still had more stuff, and I was like, hey, I need to talk about this. And I've seen this before where I don't lose people. If it's still relevant, valuable content, I don't think people care. If it was 3 hours, that'd be a different story. But being an extra 20 minutes, I'll be interested to see what the completion rates are on this. But that's coming up on Monday. So if you're a new podcaster or if you're an old podcaster and you want to know what some of the new features are that are happening in the world of podcast hosts, that's coming out on Monday. We will be here next Saturday. I don't know. We're not even close to Christmas Eve yet. I don't know what those dates are, but we're here every Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, all the way to noon. It's free podcast coach. What is that stuff called? Consulting. Here every Saturday. So thanks to the chat room. We'll see you next week.